So good morning, happy Friday. I apologize if you hear any loud noises. I still have construction going on downstairs. I think I'm just living in construction. I keep focusing on what it'll be when it's done. But today we're going to talk about logo, citation document, and style sheet, where it all begins, how you need to develop your brand. It's a lot of work, but in the end, it helps everyone in your organization and you define what's going on. So what we're going to do is we're going to talk about what is a citation and what is a style guide. Why do I need one? Then we're going to talk about citations specifically, your logo, and getting that style sheet done. So what is a web citation? Citation means a lot of different things. It can be the citation you get for leaving your car parked overnight outside after the construction workers leave. It can be what you're using when you are quoting something, when you're writing a paper. But what we're talking about is the citation that you find on the web. And we'll talk about that. It's anytime your company is mentioned on the web. And what is a design style sheet? The design style guide tells you exactly what you need to do, what your color scheme is, what the typography is, what the spacing is, the icons, the imagery. You could go way down the rabbit hole, or you could keep it simple, but it helps everyone in your organization use the same items and keeps your brand consistent. So why do I need one? I just do stuff. So it takes time to develop that style guide up front. But once you find it, you find that it's really beneficial, and you really should look at it briefly yearly. You look at it and say, do I need to upgrade it this year or not? Because things change, colors change, perception change, what the mood of the country changes. So when you have a style sheet, you have design consistency that's much easier to maintain. Everyone knows which font to use, which color to use, which logos to use. If you have a project with designers, developers, or printers, you can give them this so they know what to do. Anytime a new team member starts, they have availability to the style guide and know what to use. And it means that you can create all your assets faster because you're not switching out fonts or switching out colors. You know where to start and where to end. So this is just let's see if it will play correctly for me. I Googled myself, not myself, but the company. And if you look down, there's all different citations. There's LinkedIn, there's Yelp, there's Nextdoor, there's Marketplace at Constant Contact, there's Angie's List, there's Manta. All of these different places are citations that are on the web. So let's look at it. Let's go to the next slide. A little close-up piece. So first, if you look at it, these first do say Weiskopf Consulting LLC. Weiskopf Consulting LLC. And then you have two that say Weiskopf Consulting All Things Technical and Social. And then you have one that just says Weiskopf Consulting. So this is an old screenshot, just so you know. But you should go in because we want all of these to be as consistent as possible. Who you are. How do I know that Weiskopf Consulting is the same as Weiskopf Consulting LLC or Weiskopf Consulting All Things Technical and Social? When the crawlers crawl, they're very literal. They want them to be exact. They want the same address. They want the same phone number. They want the same title. Jen, do you want to pipe in with anything at this point, being my Google expert?
Yeah, sorry, I had to unmute myself. I think the biggest thing is to focus on first the business name. To your point, Weiskopf Consulting, for instance. The LLC or Inc. or things like that, that's a little bit of a judgment call on whether you want to include it. Some places actually don't have a spot for it or will automatically take it off. So it is one of those things that you might want to take a look at and just reserving that for your own corporate information versus, public information, perhaps. But the other thing too is, just consistent capitalization too. If you have anything that's specific about your business, that's another big one that I think a lot of people miss out on.
So that would come into that font and style guide when we get to font, is where you use all caps or not. Because you're right, on here, 2 of them are all caps and 3 of them are not.
Right.
So this is inconsistent, and that's what we want to try to avoid. So citations occur anytime on any local business directories. Some of them you put in, and some of them other people put in. It affects your SEO. It affects Google being able to see and understand which business matches the other business. But if you don't take the time to do it, and this is a once-a-year thing, because there's all kinds of things that start, like the one that you saw in there was Nextdoor. I think that was like 3 years ago it started, and I put that on there. So I may not put it on, but someone else does. Just like Google Your Business, Google will automatically pull it in and wait for you to claim it. You need to check once a year on these citations to see where you are. So citations have got an abbreviation, of course, NAP, which is for name, address, and phone number. And we want to have consistency in those. So I'm giving you an example of addresses that are inconsistent, which is, do you see a difference in these 3? So Google also sees a difference in these 3. It looks at them as 3 different addresses. So you need to, on that style sheet, be very specific about how you want each thing. The name, whether it's, like Jen says, capitalized or not, whether or not your street address has S, South, or S period, however you put it on there, it needs to be consistent. So no matter who is doing something for you, they know what to use, and it stays consistent. I'm going to go back one and just ask Jen if she has anything else she would like to say about citations before we move on.
The one thing I would say on the addresses is figure out what the standard postal address for your address is, as in what the post office. You've probably seen things like this at certain sites where you type in an address and it'll say, this is what you typed in, but this is what's recommended. And they're getting that from the postal system. I would go with what the postal system is using, because so many of these sites will use that information and check against what you've entered. So the chances of you, having consistent address, that's when it's matched up against the postal. So in case, if you don't do it on one site, it'll recommend it on another site, and that way you keep consistency. So if you're unfamiliar on what it is, you might want to check with your post office. Or again, as you enter information, note what the recommended postal address is and continue to use that, even though that might be, for instance, in this case, in the examples that you have, it might be spelling out South Main Street versus S Main and ST, but go with what the post office is recommending.
That's a great tip, Jen. Thank you so much. So my logo. Redesign versus refresh. What is right for you? So has your business changed or expanded? Do you have new competition? Are you speaking to a new audience? Have your brand's values or missions changed, or what you do change? Is your logo dated? Don't be too emotionally invested in your logo. The point of your logo is to define your business, and you need to be objective. So let's look at a few logo changes. So here we have Verizon old and new. IHOP old and new. We're going to look at those 2 first. So Verizon's was well received. IHOP's was not so well received. It got a lot of pushback. It looks like a face. They want a happy face, but a lot of people, there was a lot of memes that came out about it. They are sticking with it, but that's just where they are. And here we have Starbucks. So they define themselves as coffee to begin with, to start with, but now Starbucks does other things and sells other foods. So they really wanted their iconic mermaid image as opposed to defining them for just coffee. And Netflix in the beginning had this black background to their letters that made it seem like a theater, because you used to order, the original Netflix was ordered online and came in the mail. In fact, when my son was in high school or junior high, he had back surgery and he had a subscription to Netflix, and they would deliver them through our mail slot. Sometimes our dog would chew them up. before we got them. But now they're new. They're all online, and they've changed it to just the big N. And Facebook has so many logos. The original was down below. The current one is above. But look at all the different buttons they use. They don't get stuck on it has to be one. They do a little crowdsourcing here, or a little for each different platform they're on. So here's the MasterCard, old and new. It was well accepted. The Chevron was accepted well. Now, if we look at Gap and Kraft Foods, neither of those were accepted well. Gap changed to the one on the left quickly. And it was their new logo, and they got such backlash. After about a week, they changed back to their old logo. It was amazing. Kraft Foods put this logo out with the bright colors, wanting to make it more modern and everything, and it also got backlashed, and it went back to the original Kraft because everyone was so used to it. Now, if we look at FedEx, I know all of you have seen the FedEx logo, and I'm sure all of you know that in between the E and the X is an arrow moving their company forward. And each different EX, excuse me, I needed some water, is a different color depending on whether it's ground, international, or each different color means something different as they move forward. But they started with FedEx, and it has been well received. And you know, this is the FedEx on the right is the one we see all the time now. There's also discussion about this little spoon that's in the E. I could not define any definitive what it is. I think it's just the way the E is made. And then we have Google. Google is iconic. But Google is also very open to change, to artistic. You know, they have the Google contests every year for people to do it. And for every different occasion, they do a different Google, always using their letters. And you can see how the Google font has changed over the years. I believe this is where we are now. But they'll do fun stuff with their name. They're open to showing it in a different way, sharing it, having people do doodles for them. But you still know it's Google. Okay, I am going to go previous. Jen, do you have anything to say about logos before we move on?
No, actually, I don't.
Okay. Are there any questions about logos before we move on?
Yeah, I haven't seen any questions come through the chat, but I did put a message out there that if you do have any, please put them in the chat. I will stop Virginia and make sure that we get those answered as they come in as well.
Yeah, that will be great. So again, don't get too emotionally attached to absolutely the way your logo is. You can like it. You can be passionate about it. But keep in mind, it's not about what you want. It's about the reaction that the people outside have. So if I just see this Google font every day, it's just Google. But if I see the one up here with the sunrise, it has a meaning, or it's for a birthday. Here's the one for the space here with the shuttle going up. We all know this one, the Pac-Man Google. And on the left, you may not know that this is an Agatha Christie whodunit Google, which I thought was very cute, symbolized different ones of her movies or books. So they're open to being fun with their logo, which makes people interact with it. So let's talk about the style guide. The style guide takes time. It's a reference source that you've collected so that everyone knows what you want for your business. It tells about your logos, what to use and where to use them, because you don't just have one logo. You will have the main logo, you'll have the icon that you use on your social medias, you'll have a bunch of different logos, but it will show their colors, and tell you where to use them. Your fonts and typography will tell which specific fonts you want to use, the sizes, and in which place to use them. Colors, you should have a color chart and where to use them. You can even go as far as, especially for the website, choosing the buttons, choosing the sizes, the colors, the rollover colors, and the font size so that everyone knows what to do if you're designing your website. Those icons I referred to up on the top as logos are parts of your logo that define who you are and which social media you want to use on. And then your voice and your tagline need to be consistent, so you need to define them. So one of the things, I'm going to give you some resources here. Canva.com we've talked about many times, and we've done trainings on them. But in Canva, one of the tabs is called a brand kit. If you're using Canva for your company or your team or whatever, having this in here really helps them because they don't have to leave when they're creating assets for you. It's called Brand Kit. You can put your brand logos in here, your colors in here, and your fonts in here. So it's all in Canva. Canva is free, and it still has a brand kit, and then you need to go to Pro to use some of the other functions in it. In order to define your palette, you can go to a website called colors.co, and you can it helps you put a 3 or a 5 color palette together to use on your site, and you can download it so you have it. One of the things that we find in the new website programs is they don't use Microsoft fonts, they use Google fonts, and it's very jarring for someone who's working at it who's not used to it when they're looking for their favorite font in the drop down, whether it's WordPress or whether it's one of the other sites, and it doesn't list any of them because they're really focusing on the Google fonts because they translate much better on the web. So fonts.google.com, you can go there. It shows you the fonts, and you can download them and put them in your computer, and you can use them. So these are just resources to put your brand kit together. So here are just some logos from my digital marketing. This logo that was created for Keys to Digital Marketing Success, literally this picture lists all the colors, the numbers, and the text. Then there's a smaller icon, then there's the longer one. So all 3 of them for this are in my brand kit. So if anyone is making something for this, they can go right here and pull whatever they need. So to build a brand kit, you can do it very simply. You're going to kick off your brand with a style guide and a great story. You're going to define your brand voice. You're going to use your logo guidelines to create that recognizable brand. You're going to include your brand's core color palette for everyone to use. You're going to dictate that typography or fonts, if that's easier for you to say, hierarchy, and specify the imagery and iconography that makes up your visual style. So you've defined what you're going to do. So what does it look like? So here is one sample of a style guide that was put together. The color palette is on the left. It has the colors they want to use. The typography is on the right, showing exactly what it is, and then below it showing the font, the name of the font, the color of the font, and the size of the font, so that for header 1, header 2, header 3, header 4, they're all there and how they do it. It shows the body font. I'm sorry, it's a little blurry. I made this bigger so you could at least see it. It has the link font, and then it shows how it wants the buttons to do. So this is just one. I'm going to give you another example. Here is another example of defining colors and fonts and buttons that they put together. You don't have to do this or any of the other ones. It's just a matter of pulling them together. So what am I going to do? I want to know what my brand positioning is, what my brand tone is, and what my visual identity is. So there's 3 main components to putting this together. Again, it takes time to you may think it's just doing the logo, colors, and fonts. It's not. That's the visual identity that people see. You need to have your brand positioning, which is your purpose, your mission, your values, your vision, your story, and your buyer persona. Keep in mind that your story is not your history. I have a problem with that with a lot of non-for-profits. Your story is different from your history. History is what it is, history. Your brand tone, what you want your voice to be, what words you want to use, what editorial style you want, so that people know how to talk about the company. And then we get to the visual identity, which is probably what a lot of you came today thinking. It's fonts, colors, and logos. But your brand style guide is more than that. So here's your checklist. And Jen, I believe I put up a style guide that they can download if you pull that up for them to do. So first is your brand. Who, what, why. Who, what, where, why, and when. I didn't get them all there. Your mission, your purpose, your values. Your vision, your story, and who that buyer is. And you can have more than one buyer persona because you do have more than one customer. Then what is your brand tone? What is your voice, your writing style, and your tagline? The tagline should define you. In your voice, you should write down words and what they mean. And you should also put negative words in that brand tone that you don't want people to use. Then we want to look at our citations, our name, address, and phone consistency. And Jen had a great tip here about using the standardization from the post office. That is a great tip. The logo. Yes, you love your logo and it's who you are, but it really doesn't need to be changed or just refreshed. Have you had it for 5 years or 10 years? 5 years in electronic world is really long. So you need to look at that. When you're doing your style sheet, you should have no more than 3 or 4 fonts in various sizes and get them from Google Fonts. And then define that color palette so they know exactly what color blue to use. Because if you look at this page, and I did it on purpose, there are 3 different shades of blue here. And everyone sees color differently. So you want to make sure it's consistent and define what that color is. So this was very quick this morning, though it was a lot of information. If you want to see any of our others, and I'm going to bring my screen down in a minute so we can have Q&A, you can go to Weiskopf Consulting Education. Our next ones are up for you to sign up for. And any previous recorded trainings are on our YouTube channel.